Hello, BookTube. Well, I'm on death's doorstep with a head cold, so I thought I would do some therapy, some tag therapy. I haven't done tags in a little bit, and I love doing them there. One of my favorite BookTube things to do, and there's a whole bunch that are out there that I've either been tagged on and haven't done, or that I haven't been tagged on and haven't done. So I thought I'd get to some of those today, just as many as I can get through. It's actually taxing to sit up, so who knows how many of these things I'll do. But the first one, I have the trusty notebook here. The first one is the Sword and Sorcery tag, which was created by Geek Legend of Doom, and I was tagged by R. St. Clair. Geek Legend of Doom's channel I don't know at all, but R. St. Clair I've been watching, and her channel's fantastic, so I will leave a link down below. And it's a series of questions about sword and sorcery that I think probably started off as a movie or TV tag, and that can be adapted to books, of course, because Sword and Sorcery started there, not in movies. And it requires, at first, I think, that we define our terms, just so that people aren't plopping down Lord of the Rings for every single one of these answers. The key difference between a fantasy story and a Sword and Sorcery story, Sword and Sorcery is a subset of fantasy, in which the stakes are smaller, and in which the outcome largely depends on the physical victory of the hero. Usually, it's a hero. As one of my subscribers commented when it comes to Conan the Barbarian, that one of the essential allures of his stories, I was talking about his morose character and the wonderful world building of Robert E. Howard, and one of my subscribers says also thews. Conan has thews. Other people have muscles. He has thews. And it is something like that. Sword and Sorcery comes down to the personal. It comes down to a sword wielder and a sorcerer. The fate of the world, usually, is not at stake in Sword and Sorcery. And that's an important distinction to make, because as we're going to see, it drastically changes the field of what the answers are. And the very first question, of course, as you would expect, is what is your favorite Sword and Sorcery movie? And for this, my answer is going to be Conan from 2011. The Jason Momoa Conan movie is, I think, one of the purer examples of Sword and Sorcery that has ever been made with a respectable special effects budget on the big screen. Although that's not the last time that we will come to Conan in this. You can't avoid Conan when you talk about Sword and Sorcery. He's a perfect example. He himself has no supernatural abilities whatsoever, and precious little respect for the supernatural, as we're told over and over again in the Conan stories. The Cimmerians, where he comes from, they have gods, but they don't pray to them. They don't like them, and their gods don't like them. The next question, of course, is your least favorite Sword and Sorcery movie, and for me, that would be the 2007 animation, live-action animation, whatever you call it, that computer animated thing that looks so terrible, version of Beowulf, starring Ray Winston as Beowulf, which it had all of the best intentions, but it's almost unbearable for me. Then question number 3 is, if you could pick 4 Sword and Sorcery movie characters to go on a quest with, who would they be? And for this question, I'm going to cheat a little, because I'm not going to bother with individual characters, because in Sword and Sorcery, usually, unfortunately, you're dealing with types, not characters. Even Conan falls into a type. And if I were on a Sword and Sorcery quest, keep in mind, again, Sword and Sorcery stories usually don't have quests. Quests tend to be the forerunner of a much bigger storyline and enter into epic fantasy. But if we say for the minute that we're going to go on a Sword and Sorcery quest, I wouldn't want people so much as types. The first one I would want would be a healer, or maybe 2. And that is a character who, either through mystic means or through an incredibly advanced knowledge of herbs and anatomy and whatnot, can actually fix you up from any of the stuff that goes wrong on your quest. Those are essential. If all Sword and Sorcery takes place pre-technology, so it's not even just a question of someone to dress your wounds. It's a question of what happens if you cut your hand while you're sharpening your sword. Then, in a few days you've got tetanus, and in another few days you're dead. You need somebody to deal with infections, is what I'm saying. That'd be the first one. Second one would be a cook. A major thing that's often overlooked is, it's not like, for instance, you think of Quest, you think automatically of Lord of the Rings and the Fellowship of the Ring. But it's not every quest that sets out with elvish whey bread. One little wafer-thin bite can last you for a whole afternoon. Most quests most Most movements over country at all of any kind rely on their belly. So a cook, a very good cook, would be very good. I think it's a quest story, but it's not sword and sorcery. I think of Poe Campo from Lonesome Dove, the cook that Colin McRae find, who will not ride. He will not ride a donkey or a horse, but he can make a delicious meal out of virtually anything. And that somebody like him would be mighty handy. Then number 3, I would want transport. And for this, I don't just mean somebody who knows how to fix a broken wagon axle. I mean maybe somebody who can, with a spell, transport you over long distances of time, or who knows a way to do that mystically or even archaeotechnologically without traveling that distance. Someone who does transport is really useful. That's true in Sword and Sorcery quests. It's also true in superhero team books. You want people who can do transport in superhero team books. Otherwise, you're kind of sunk. One of the quintessential superhero team books was Marvel's Avengers. They've now become known all over the world for a billion-dollar movie franchise. But before that, for decades, they were a superhero team. I read the Avengers right from the beginning, and when the idea of a superhero team was still fuzzy, it was the Justice League and the Justice Society, but other than that, nobody knew how Marvel was going to do superhero teams. And the Avengers had an original roster, and then after a year, they changed their roster almost completely to a quartet. Captain America, Quicksilver, a mutant who can run at super speed, the Scarlet Witch, his sister, who has probability-altering hex powers, and Hawkeye the Marksman. And Marvel Comics got a few peppery letters from small town Iowa when that happened, saying, what happens if the team needs to fly and they don't have access to an Avengers Quinjet? What happens if you throw one of them off a building? None of these members can fly. None of them can transport the team. And you need that. You absolutely need that. You went from a team where 3 out of 5 members could fly to one where none out of 4 can fly. What kind of transport is that? As usual, those letters from small town Iowa went unheeded. And Captain America's era with Cap's kooky quartet has gone down in history as one of the greatest incarnations of the Avengers. Go figure. But anyway, and the last one would be, the last of the 4 would be a magic worker. Something that I've sort of hinted at in some of the earlier 3. And by that, I mean something very different from a wizard. I think if I had a wizard on a Sword and Sorcery quest where I was a member, I would strangle them in their sleep. Wizards are insufferable. They talk in riddles. They traffic in fake profundities, and their magic is almost always useless, or it makes everybody else useless. Now, a magic worker, though, is different. Somebody who's humble, somebody who knows a craft, somebody who has limitations, and somebody who wants to help. Sort of like the IT guy at your work. That, sure. So those are the 4 that I would want. A healer, or more than one, because if something happens to your healer, what do you do? A cook, someone for transport, and a magic worker. And then question number 4 is, you can pick any weapon from a Sword and Sorcery movie. What do you pick? I absolutely wouldn't. That is to paraphrase Admiral Akbar, that's a trap. All Sword and Sorcery weapons of any special kind, if they have a name, or if they look different or weird or whatever, or have special abilities, always work against their wielders. No. They're not going to trick me. No. An ordinary sword would be fine. A double-edged saber would be fine. Nice and heavy in the handle. Good tempered steel. That will be fine. I don't want anything more than that. Question number 5. What Sword and Sorcery... Okay, the question actually puts it this way. I threw up a little in my mouth when I read it the first time, but I'm so sick now. What Sword and Sorcery IP needs a reboot or remake? That stands for intellectual property. And there are a whole bunch of actual human ways to say that, not android ways. What Sword and Sorcery creation needs a reboot or a remake? And believe it or not, despite my answer to the first question, I am going to say Conan the Barbarian. Conan, the 2011 Conan was a terrific movie, but it was hard. It would be hard. Biggest fan I am of its star. It would be hard in that movie to look at that movie just with the sound off, for instance, or as a total stranger to the genre, and pick out what made Conan himself special. Why it couldn't have been some other muscle-bound young man in that role. And you shouldn't think that way. If you're watching a Conan movie that is a true adaptation of Conan, you shouldn't think that way. Certainly you never think that way in a Conan story. So my answer to this one would be Conan. I would want a Conan remake, and I know just what it would be. Oh my God, I know just what it would be. I have a friend who works in Hollywood. She's worked in Hollywood for years, and I actually pitched this idea to her. I said, take credit for it. I don't want to be involved in any way, but I want someone in Hollywood to hear this idea. And that is, Conan originally started off in a story where he's an old man. Old in terms of his, Hyborian age. He's not old as we would consider it now. Thanks to the blessings of modern medicine, people live until they're 100 easily. But in Phoenix on the Sword, Conan is old. He's an old and seasoned king looking back on a life in which he has been many things, a reaver, a freebooter, and Robert E. Howard's Conan stories do that. They bounce back and forth between all the different eras of Conan's life. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot more fun that way than doing it in the straightforward chronological remake that L. Sprague de Camp did when those stories were coming out in the matching mass market paperback form 50 years ago. And the Conan remake that I would have would be Phoenix on the Sword with an older Conan played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think it's absolutely natural, and I bet if it were presented to him in the right way, he would take it. So I pitched it to my friend in Hollywood and said, you could take credit for this. I just want it in the, as we put it now in 2019, I want it in the bloodstream. And she said, believe me, the idea has been put to Arnold many, many times to do that movie. And he's never absolutely refused. He's never absolutely said no. She says that the common phrase going around is that he just hasn't liked the scripts that he's given, the various scripts that he's given. In Hollywood, that translates to he hasn't been offered a Mount Rushmore of money. And I don't mean metaphorically. I mean a pile of money as high as Mount Rushmore. If he is offered a pile of money that high as Mount Rushmore, then he might do it. So for, let's say, a movie studio with a total market network, nationwide, of, I don't even know, let's say $700 billion. Let's say a movie network, conglomeration, entertainment network, TV, cable, movies, in its global market share value was, let's say, $600 billion. If that movie studio were to go to Arnold Schwarzenegger and say, we will pay you everything, all of it, all that we have, we will offer you $600 billion, then he would probably do it. So we could live to see it. I don't know. It doesn't have to be him, but he would be ideal for obvious casting reasons. But that's my whether it's him or not, it would be Conan. Only maybe done a little more with a little more fidelity to Conan, and maybe a little bit less of an eye on box office. But anyway, let's see here. Question number 6. What's your favorite Sword and Sorcery TV show? There can be no competition here. There is only one possible answer, and that is, of course, Xena. Warrior Princess. That is the only. It's such a show. Such an amazing show. The whole of it, episode by episode, was so good that I am, believe it or not, willing to forgive it its final episode. The final episode was an absolute travesty. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen done to an intellectual character. I mentioned Lonesome Dove. Another one of those things would be the thing that Larry McMurtry does to Woodrow Call, one of his greatest characters from Lonesome Dove. The thing that he does to Call in later books would come close, but as far as I'm concerned, there was no greater personal betrayal of a fictional character than what happened in the last episode of Xena. And I'm willing to forgive the show anyway for that, because of how great the rest of it was. So yeah, it would be Xena. Then let's see here. Question number 7. With few exceptions, Sword and Sorcery is traditionally one of the most un-PC genres. Okay, I don't know what that means. Where do you see it going, and what would you like to see? Un-PC genres, I don't know what that means, except in post-2016 public mentality, it probably means where the male lead character, where the lead character is almost always male, he's always fit, he's almost always white, and he's always heterosexual. And I want to stress here. I know that I know this is the YouTube BookTube is where we go to get away from all the rest of this, but nevertheless, I want to stress having a character who is white and male and heterosexual is not non-PC. Okay, that is not non-PC. In order for something to be non-PC, I would think it would have to be offensive. Those things are not inherently offensive. Okay, but so if the question means non-PC in that way, then I can't help it, because I'm not gonna play that kind of game. I have been down these fads too many times to take any one of them seriously, especially if the current one that's in ascendancy is using the weapons of totalitarian repressive regimes to get its way. If that's true, then it never wanted me as a quote-unquote ally, and it certainly doesn't have me. But if we mean it in the more generous sense, that there have been un-PC genres because the heroes have always been white cis men, well, one of the ways you could do to fix that would be to change that. But if you're changing it, this is a quagmire, isn't it? If you're changing any of those things specifically only to change those things rather than in service to a better story or different story, eye-opening story, an interesting story, if you're doing it just to do those things, then it will fail at the box office. Much as I hate the group of people who use, most of the people who use it as a slogan, I don't think there's any denying the actual validity of the slogan that is used by the quote-unquote alt-right, which is get woke, go broke. The public does not want that stuff crammed down their throat. They're perfectly willing to make Black Panther, for instance, a multi-billion-dollar international success of a movie and sing its praises from the rooftops, provided Black Panther does not tell them that they should, and that if they don't, they're bad people. Black Panther, of course, scrupulously does not do that. And so it was able to concentrate on just being fantastic, and as a result, it won the reward that things that are fantastic typically do. If that's the way you do it, fine. Absolutely. Like, for instance, well, I don't know what's going to happen now. I just can't believe that, that Bryan Singer's Bohemian Rhapsody did so well at the Oscars, considering the darkening cloud over his name. I can't believe it. And I don't know what would happen. He was scheduled to do, forever and ever, he's been scheduled to do a Red Sonja movie. Red Sonja, of course, being a creation of Roy Thomas, adapted from a character by Robert E. Howard, who is a perfect answer to a lot of what this question referred to as non-PC. As we've seen on this channel, I've talked about Conan quite a bit on this channel, and Red Sonja is a fantastic creation because she is not a concession in any way. She's Conan's equal. She has a terrific backstory, a terrific character design, a terrific personality. She's Conan's equal. Plain and simple. She has a different origin story than he does, but even so, she would have been a really high-profile example of that. But how can a Bryan Singer movie go on? How can a Bryan Singer movie continue even with the prestige that he racked up at the Oscars? This is a guy who, if there's any justice, will be in a criminal docket at the end of 2019. So how's he going to direct a movie? How's he going to direct a movie, especially if the movie has any young men in it? any young man, any male actor under the age of, for instance, 21. Anyway. But anyway, in terms of the actual questions here, before I got on my soapbox, where do you see the genre going, and what would you like to see? If we're talking about movies, I know what I would like to see, and that's more. Sword and Sorcery is a terrific tapestry on which to tell a story, and we don't get many Sword and Sorcery movies, not legitimately so. I'd like more of them. I'd like a lot more Sword and Sorcery fiction as well. Sword and Sorcery fiction that understands what it is, and not that thinks it's just a prelude to the world ending. But Sword and Sorcery movies, I see all of them that come out. The place where we used to be, if you wanted to watch a Sword and Sorcery B movie, something straight to video, you went to Blockbuster Video and you just haunted the crap aisles. I did that many times, found wonderful stuff there. And now I see that Netflix has its own version of crap aisles. So, for $10 a month, $12 a month, you get a gigantic library of stuff that no returns, no late fees, no nothing like that. It's a wonderful system, well worth the money. And there's a lot of crap fantasy on there that I watch that doesn't come with all of the annoyances that renting it from Blockbuster did. You rented it from Blockbuster, you knew in 10 seconds of watching it. You knew in 10 seconds whether or not it was bad in a good way or bad in an unwatchable way, and you just wasted your money and time. And you still had to bring it back. Netflix doesn't have anything like that. So it's a pain-free experience at that. But I'd still like more of those in movie theaters. It's just movies have become so prohibitively expensive that you can't do it. But that's what I'd like. Then question number 8. Do you have any special edition re-releases of Sword and Sorcery movies or merchandise that you love? Nope. Question number 9. What Hollywood actor would you cast as He-Man or She-Ra? Have any idea. I don't know anything about either one of those characters. I seem to remember. Don't I remember that He-Man had a live-action movie a long, long time ago when the world made sense? I think it did. But anyway, question number 10. What is your favorite on-screen dragon? I'm gonna fudge things a little here because dragons can be anywhere, of course. They don't have to be sword and sorcery. Since dragons can be anywhere, I'm going to pick one that's in set in contemporary times, and that is the 1998 movie Godzilla with Jean Reno and Matthew Broderick. I love that movie. I just think it's fantastic. I don't know why. It wears its flaws pretty close to the surface, but I love it anyway. And that Godzilla would be my favorite. Then question number 11. What is an underrated sword and sorcery movie that you can recommend? And I split my answer here into movie and book, because books aren't getting enough love on this thing. The movie would be from 1987, back when everything made sense. And it's Deathstalker 2. There was a whole string of completely cookie-cutter, generic sword and sorcery movies called Deathstalker. And I watched the first one, and I thought, oh, okay, that was boring. Interesting in a way, for a popcorn movie, but only really just to get a group of people together and get them talking. And then I watched Deathstalker number 2, which I admit had a rather interesting theatrical poster. And Deathstalker 2 astonished me by being self-awaredly funny. It wasn't funny in the way of most cheesy B-grade sword and sorcery movies where you're laughing at it and it's taking itself seriously, like Ator, for instance. Don't get me started on Ator. No, instead it was intentionally being funny, and in a good way, in a way that worked. It wasn't true with Deathstalker 1, it wasn't true with any of the subsequent Deathstalker movies, but Deathstalker 2 is worth your time to watch. Believe it or not. You probably don't. And I also want to pick a book here, and the book is by Duncan McGeary, and it's Star Axe. It's a fantasy novel, a paperback-only fantasy novel from, 35 years ago, in which there's an enchanted weapon, the eponymous Star Axe, which is a perfect example of the kind of thing I was talking about, where it's not anything you want anything to do with. Any headlining weapon in a fantasy movie is not anything you want anything to do with. What does Excalibur bring to Arthur but heartache? But in any case, the next rightful wielder of the Star Axe is in this book a healer, someone who's dedicated his life to peace and healing. And I think Duncan McGeary does a really good job. The book never took off. It was never anywhere except on the metal spinner rack at your drugstore. But it's worth a reread if you find it. And that is it. That is the sword and sorcery tag, part of my tag therapy. I don't know that I have enough strength to tag people, but I will. I will tag people in the description down below. But in the meantime, I want to thank R. St. Clair. I think she tagged me directly, if I remember correctly. I'm not on my game when I'm this sick. But I want to thank, I love the tag. I love thinking about sword and sorcery. I wish it would make a huge comeback. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now. But I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.